A house stands vacant in Cleveland. A house that used to be a home that used to have a family that used to have a dream, the American dream of home ownership. Thousands of houses stand vacant in Cleveland, Ohio as a direct result of subprime mortgages and predatory lending. And while banking institutions get the taxpayer bailout, the city taxpayers are left to clean up these messes. The subprime lending crisis had some invisible victims, the taxpayers in American cities and in Cleveland, Ohio. Subprime lenders saw Cleveland as a gold mine for high interest loans. The number of foreclosures in Cleveland has steadily climbed since 2002. The cost to the city to manage vacant houses has been estimated to be in the millions, and the city of Cleveland is fighting back with a lawsuit. Hopefully they will win. In the 1990s, Cuyahoga County Treasurer Jim Rokakis began to notice a disturbing trend in home purchases. People were buying homes with no down payments and getting cash back on the closing. An article in the Cleveland Plain Dealer listed several home buyers that were buying multiple properties just to get the cash back. The mortgage brokers knew the loans would be sold, so they did not perform due diligence on the buyers. This was probably the beginning of Cleveland's mortgage crisis and the birth of subprime lending. The subprime lending market saw a gold mine in Cleveland for many reasons. Cleveland was ranked as the poorest city in the United States by the U.S. Census Bureau in 2004. The housing market here did not prosper. Housing values were low and they stayed low. There was not much of a demand in Cleveland for new homes to be built. Manufacturing jobs were steadily lost here, and new jobs were not being created. The unemployment rate in Cleveland was very high, and more than half of Cleveland's population was minority. According to 2000 census data, 58% of Cleveland's population was non-white. It was a perfect place to seek out subprime borrowers. Thousands of Clevelanders borrowed to buy homes using subprime mortgages. They wanted to take part in the American dream. They wanted to own a home. They wanted to raise a family. Their dreams were shattered, however, when the foreclosure notices came. In 2002, there were 111 mortgage foreclosures in Cuyahoga County. In 2004, the number doubled. In 2005, it quadrupled. And in 2006, over 14,000 people lost their homes to foreclosure. By 2007, 20 homeowners a day were facing foreclosure and homelessness. A report published by the Housing Research and Advocacy Center claimed that abandoned homes in Cleveland had already cost the city over $35 million. The costs include lost tax revenue, demolition and boarding up abandoned properties, grass and garbage removal, police and fire expenditures, neighborhood and property devaluation, and aid to newly homeless families and children. The city of Cleveland became the national poster child for the subprime lending crisis. Stories about Cleveland foreclosures appeared regularly on national news and in newspapers nationwide. Several of the stories focused on a Cleveland neighborhood called Slavic Village, where more than 1,000 vacant homes stagnate in decaying neighborhoods where families once thrived. The city would not, however, take this situation lightly. Ohio politicians spoke out against the lending practices and attempted to get help from the Federal Reserve. In 2007, Ohio U.S. Representative Stephanie Tubbs Jones reintroduced the Predatory Lending Practice Reduction Act of 2005. She testified that not all subprime lenders are predatory, but most predatory loans are subprime loans. This legislation would work to weed out the bad actors that are responsible for equity stripping and other predatory practices. Ohio Congressman Dennis Kucinich addressed the House in 2007, where he testified, quote, "In geographical areas where the number of subprime mortgage loans is the highest, the number of foreclosures for the same geographical area will also be high." When Ohio's politicians attempted to get help from the Federal Reserve, they failed. Cleveland City Council passed an emergency ordinance to prohibit predatory lending in the city of Cleveland. But then the Ohio State Legislature voided the ordinance by passing a law that prohibited city government from regulating lenders. Finally, in January of 2008, the city of Cleveland filed a lawsuit against 21 major banks in the U.S. and abroad. Cleveland Mayor Frank Jackson was quoted in the Cleveland Plain Dealer stating, quote, "To me, this is no different than organized crime or drugs. It has the same effect as drug activity in our neighborhoods. It's a form of organized crime that happens to be legal." The lawsuit filed by the City of Cleveland implies that companies involved should have foreseen the consequences of their actions and that they should reimburse the city for the millions of dollars in expenses it has incurred as a result of vacant homes. The banking institutions that have responded to the lawsuit deny any wrongdoing. The subprime mortgage problem started in the 1990s when lending institutions changed the way they did business. The banking industry created products and targeted groups of people that would likely accept the offers to realize the American dream of home ownership without understanding the consequences. The City of Cleveland has suffered measurable damage from the practices of these predatory lending institutions. The local politicians that tried to get help at the federal level were largely ineffective, and when the city tried to take action, it was nullified at the state level. The city is still pursuing the lawsuit against major lending institutions, but it will most certainly be stalled in the legal process for years to come. The victims of predatory lending are everyday people that have lost their homes, their wealth, their life savings, their hope, and their hope of the American dream. The victims of predatory lendings are homeowners that now live in blighted areas filled with vacant homes. The victims of predatory lending are citizens of Cleveland that have substandard police and fire service due to vandalism, criminal activity, and drug activity in vacant homes. The victims of predatory lending are taxpayers that bailed out these banks and lending institutions. In Cleveland, thousands of homes stand vacant, but one question remains. Whatever happened to the American dream?